Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to rise this evening with some of my colleagues to repudiate some of the comments that have been made here tonight, to correct some of the record, and to provide, I think, the real story, Mr. Speaker, of what is going on in America, and compare that. And my friend from Iowa who was up here prior to me stated that it's about the record. And I would 100% agree. It is about the record. And if you look at the past few years prior to the Democrats taking over, our friends on the other side had complete control of the entire federal government. And in states like Ohio, they had control of the whole Ohio government. And with President Bush, Republican House, Republican Senate, they had an opportunity to implement their economic policy. They had an opportunity to implement their foreign policy. They had an opportunity to implement their energy policy. They had an opportunity to implement their health care policy. All across the board, our friends on the other side had an opportunity to govern this great country. And the end result we saw just a few short years ago with deregulation of Wall Street, turning a blind eye to what was going on, hoping that the health care problem would go away, hoping that the energy policy, the energy problems we had in this country would go away. And the end result was what happened just a couple of years ago, with the complete collapse of the American economy, with trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars lost by American families and American businesses, with millions of people losing their homes due to foreclosure, with the federal government down here saying that government never works, it has no role, no place in our society, let the free market work. Let Wall Street run the show, let the multinational corporations run the show, and we will do everything in our power while President Bush was in office to completely denigrate the responsibilities of having a referee on the field to monitor Wall Street shenanigans, Mr. Speaker, to make sure, learning from history, that if you let Wall Street go without any regulation, that they will run free and for a short time monitor themselves, but then after a while they will get greedy and they will cheat. And it will become inherent in the system. And at some point, as we saw many economists predicting the collapse that they said maybe would happen in 08, maybe 09, or maybe 06, they thought it would come a little bit earlier, but there were economists out there that could see what was going to happen. And it did. The unregulated free market Wall Street collapsed and took Main Street with it. And for example, our friends on the other side, just in the last week or so, when this Congress and this President passed a complete overhaul of the regulations of Wall Street to make sure that this doesn't happen again, our friends on the other side voted against it. Mr. Speaker, voted against regulating Wall Street after we all just watched as a country and as the world watched this system collapse. Because people just started moving money around. You want to talk about family values and taking responsibility? We are now holding Wall Street's feet to the fire, and our friends on the other side said, nope, we're going to side with the big banks. We're going to side with Wall Street. We're going to side with the status quo. And to me, Mr. Speaker, that's unacceptable. That's unacceptable. And we have a bogeyman America now. Oh, we got to hold up San Francisco agenda's coming, or here comes socialism, it's coming at you. This time in our country's history requires very sober, mature analysis of the facts and an attempt to build a consensus around solutions. And our friends on the other side have consistently said no, 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 no to everything that we've done. Now, you can't disagree with everything. My goodness gracious, everything? Regulating Wall Street, saying we need a referee on the field to keep an eye on the big banks and the big-time money firms on Wall Street, to say they need regulated, and you say no? To say that we wanted to pass unemployment insurance at this very difficult time, and the Republicans put up procedural block after procedural block saying no? They come out and readily admit we've got to pay for $30 billion in unemployment insurance, but we don't have to pay for $650 billion worth of tax cuts that go primarily to the top 1% of the people in the United States of America, millionaires? That doesn't need to be paid for? So what we're here tonight to do, Mr. Speaker, is to provide for this chamber and for the American people and to put into the congressional record the choice, the difference between the party that is now governing the country and the party of George W. Bush, who left us this mess. Now, no one's saying that we can fix this overnight, but basically what happened is that we were in a football game, and President Bush was the quarterback. And when they took President Bush out as quarterback, we were down 50-0. And now President Obama is in as the quarterback. Democrats are now in on the team. And we may not have won the game yet, but we're early. We're still in the second quarter, and the score's now 50-21. But we're moving in the right direction. And when you look at where the Bush economic policies that everyone on the other side of the aisle, Mr. Speaker, rubber stamped, those policies cost our country millions and millions of jobs. 8 million jobs were lost because of the economic collapse on Wall Street, which was the final result of the Bush economic policies. Millions of people and their homes went into foreclosure because of the Bush economic policies. Trillions of dollars in wealth was lost because of the Bush economic policies. We were bleeding jobs. The January that President Obama came into office, we were losing almost 800,000 jobs in that month alone. In that month alone. And so this president and this Congress took a series of bold measures that weren't necessarily the most popular measures to take, but definitely needed. Mature measures to help stabilize our economy and turn it around. And that, Mr. Speaker, beyond all facts to be presented, worked. Now, as I said, we are not anywhere near where we need to be. But it worked. The stimulus package worked. Did it work well enough? Probably not. But I can only imagine what would have happened if our friends on the other side were in charge and there wasn't any stimulus package at all. How many thousands and thousands of teachers would have been laid off? How many thousands and thousands of state workers would have been laid off? Police and fire would have been laid off because our friends on the other side said no. We're going to implement a political strategy that means we have to repudiate everything that President Obama does. We have to hope that he does well or does poorly. We have to root against the president. We have to root for the president to fail. We have to root for the country to fail so that we could maybe benefit politically in the next election. And that's what happened. No to the stimulus, no to unemployment compensation, no on reducing our dependency on foreign oil, no to taking on the insurance companies, no to Wall Street reform, no to the banks, no to providing more credit for small businesses, no to tax credits. This is the one I really like. Our friends on the other side voted against getting rid of the tax credit that incentivized moving jobs offshore. Now, can you imagine saying that, you know, there's some things I'm for, some things I'm against? Our friends on the other side voted against a closing of a loophole to disincentivize jobs moving offshore. Where Democrats are closing that loophole and incentivizing American manufacturing. Things made in the United States again. Making things in the United States again. Those times where our parents and grandparents grew up, where we made things as a country, where we built things. And that's what the energy revolution is all about. We send $1 billion a day offshore. $1 billion a day, Mr. Speaker. Offshore to oil-producing countries that don't like us all that much. And in many instances, take our money and fund terroristic acts, try to in the United States and across the world. And then we have to spend money in our military to combat the global terrorist acts. So if we come up with the idea of, can't we produce our own energy here with nuclear, natural gas, wind, solar, and put people back to work in the United States making the 8,000 component parts that go into a windmill, making the 400 tons of steel that go into a windmill, making the component parts that go into a solar panel? This is the idea of putting America back to work. And our friends on the other side, Mr. Speaker, are saying, no, let's keep giving tax cuts to the oil companies so that they could keep drilling, when we only have 2% of the world's oil in the United States of America. There's a real choice here. There's a real difference here. And it's important for all of us to recognize the choices that have been made down here and the differences between the two parties. So we've stabilized things. We went from losing 750,000 jobs in that first month in January, and now we have an average monthly job growth of 170,000 jobs a month here in the United States. Not nearly enough. We need more. And we're working on more by helping small businesses. 8+ small business tax credits to help create jobs, including a tax credit to create jobs here in the United States, as opposed to a tax credit that our friends on the other side support to move jobs overseas. So that we can put Americans back to work, making things, manufacturing things, and taking on China. That's what these policies are all about. A green revolution in the United States is about resuscitating manufacturing in the United States. And let me say that if you had a 401k, or if you have a retirement plan, it looks a heck of a lot better today than it did when our friends threw us the keys. Most families have gained about 60% of their wealth back because of the increase in the stock market, because of the policies of this administration. the bold policies of this administration. We have seen 98% of families in the United States in this past year see a reduced level of taxation. Again, it's in vogue today in America, especially if you're part of the neoconservative, radical right wing that has taken control of the Republican Party, quite frankly, Mr. Speaker, to put up another bogeyman and say they're raising your taxes. Well, we haven't. 98% of Americans have seen a reduction in taxes. And so we are doing what we need to do to get us out of this economic catastrophe that President Bush and his Republican Party left this country. Deregulated Wall Street, looked the other way, let the insurance companies run crazy over the health insurance industry, and we've seen skyrocketing costs, incentivize drill baby drill, continue down that road, while oil-producing countries take our money and fund terrorism, when we could be investing that money in the United States and manufacturing renewable energy products here. So we have seen, Mr. Speaker, a dramatic change over the course of the last 2 years. So the choice is quite clear. Do we return back to the failed, tried, and tested policies, the worn-out, trite policies of the Bush administration? Do we trot those back out after we saw where they took us? Do we bring out those, here's the thing that I love. Our friends on the other side said, well, if we just cut taxes for the people that make all the money, it'll trickle down and it'll benefit everybody else. We tried that, Mr. Speaker. That was the policies of the first 6 years of this decade. Bush came in, passed his tax cuts, and we didn't see extreme economic growth. We didn't see the middle class rise. We didn't see wages go up. We saw more offshoring of jobs to China and foreign countries. We saw the tax burden pushed off on the middle class. We saw health care costs skyrocket and go through the roof, continuing to take money out of the pockets of middle class families. We saw tuition costs go up all across the country, 9% a year. And Pell Grant, because our friends said, well, you're on your own, we don't even want to invest in education, Pell Grants did not keep pace with where they needed to be. And our friend who was here earlier was talking about the student loans, how the Department of Education took over the student loan program and the free market. Yeah, because the banks were charging our kids 8-9%. You want to keep that system going, where you got to take out a student loan and you get out of college and you owe $20,000 or $30,000 to get a college education? Or heaven forbid you get a master's degree or go to medical school and you come out with hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt so the banks could make a profit off of trying to educate our kids so we could be globally competitive? That's what the other side wants to do, Mr. Speaker. They want to keep that system in place. They liked it just the way it was. Everybody was happy. The insurance companies were happy. The multinationals were happy. The banks were happy. Wall Street was happy. But we weren't happy as a country. And not only did the banks charge 8 or 9% for a student loan, check this out. The government said if a student defaults on that loan, we'll pick up the tab. Jesus, wouldn't it be nice to be a bank under George Bush? You mean I get to loan this student and this family a student loan at 8%, and if they default on it, the government will come in and pick up the tab? Hey, we should all go into banking and be that lucky. And they set up a system Wall Street did, that if there were lots of profits and lots of economic activity, they reaped all the benefits and the wealth was not spread throughout society. They would benefit. And that if it failed and collapsed, they would bring the whole country down with them, Main Street included. And then President Obama gets in, and we pass the most sweeping Wall Street reforms since the Great Depression, and our friends on the other side voted against it just to keep the status quo. So let's recap a little bit. Bush comes in, Republicans rubber stamp his agenda, they cut taxes for the top 1%, they try to privatize Social Security and Medicare. Their policies are implemented across the board, economic, energy, foreign policy, right down the line. After they're all implemented, the economy completely collapses and shuts down. And then the Democrats come in, we get the keys to the car, the wheels are spinning, wobbling, there's cracks in the windshield, there's steam coming out of the engine, the tailpipe's dragging on the ground, there's no back window. It's like the car from The Big Lebowski that the dude used to drive. So this thing's just wobbling down the aisle, wobbling down the street. We get the keys to the car. We make some bold, take some bold, needed actions. And our friends on the other side don't even try to solve the problem. Don't even try to solve the problem. But what has happened is we saw from losing 700,000 jobs a month to creating, on average, 170,000 jobs a month. We saw the stock market go from a little over 6,000 up to 11,000, and 60% of the wealth returned to American families. We have seen a reduction in student loans, an increase in Pell Grants, an increase in the minimum wage, making sure everybody in the country has health care. We try to provide, and we have provided, tax incentives for businesses who create jobs here in the United States of America, as opposed to our friends on the other side who voted against closing the loophole to bring jobs to the U.S. They wanted to keep the status quo, which incentivized people and businesses moving their companies offshore. And our friends on the other side don't want us to reduce our dependency on foreign oil, and have consistently voted against initiatives to resuscitate manufacturing here in the United States and invest into green technologies and green energy here in the United States. So on and on and on. In addition to that, Mr. Speaker, which I think really highlights the difference between the two parties, is if you look at the alternative budget provided by the Republican Party here in the House of Representatives. It privatizes Social Security, and it attempts to turn Medicare into a voucher system for our senior citizens. Again, a leap back to the Bush-era policies. Do we really want to go back there? And I'm the first to say, Mr. Speaker, we haven't done everything right. I could talk about my disagreements that I have with some of what the President has done, or everything that we're not all in agreement here. But clearly, there's a difference between what we have done and what our friends on the other side handed us after full implementation of their agenda. And I'd like to yield to the gentlelady from Florida.
Thank you so much, Mr.